Chancellor, I've got the manifesto here. Where in this manifesto does it say that the next Labour government is going to increase spending by 74 billion and raise taxes by 40 billion? Because I have looked through it and I can't find it.
Hold on to your wallets, Britain. Labour's budget just dropped, and surprise, surprise, it's not the golden ticket Reeves and Starmer promised. No, Rachel Reeves strutted up to the podium with all the confidence of a magician about to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Except, surprise, that rabbit turned out to be a monstrous £40 billion tax hike, a freshly minted debt mountain, and a plan to crush the working class while promising to save them. Welcome to Labour's world, where no tax on working people is code for they won't see it coming. Remember when Labour swore they wouldn't raise taxes on working people? Trust us, they said, we've got your backs. Well, Britain, they lied. They won the election with their friendly neighbourhood Labour Party act, only to turn around and stab us in the back with a sneaky backdoor tax on every worker in the country. How? By hiking employer national insurance and slashing the threshold. You don't need to be an economist to know who's going to pay for that little technicality. That's right, you, me, and every worker in the country staring at shrinking pay rises and higher prices.
Public finances
£40
on a
billion
sound trajectory
of taxes. It's the biggest tax-raising budget since 1993. It's gigantic. And you said before the election no plans to raise taxes, or the PM did, beyond the £8 billion that you had earmarked. So a lot of people out there are going to be quite shocked today.
Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer pulled off one of the biggest cons in British political history. This isn't a no tax on working people budget. This is the worst-kept secret tax on every worker and small business. Sunak may have been out of touch with the common man, but at least he wasn't slipping us the bill in invisible ink. And on Labour's X account today, they had the audacity to boast about saving us 1 penny on a pint of beer. I'm lost for words. At this point, they are simply taking the piss out of us. They think they can fool the working-class people of this country by giving us a measly 1 pence back on a pint of beer, at the same time as delivering a £40 billion tax hike. Even Rishi Sunak can't believe what Labour's done here. Let's have a listen to what he had to say about it.
With a budget that contains broken promise after broken promise. And reveals the simple truth that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have not been straight with the British people. Time and again, we Conservatives warned Labour would tax, borrow and spend far beyond what they were telling the country. And time and again, they denied they had such plans. But today, the truth has come out. Proof that they planned to do this all along. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget sees the fiscal rules fiddled, borrowing increased by billions of pounds, inflation-busting handouts for the trade unions, Britain's poorest pensioners squeezed, welfare spending out of control, and a spree of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do. National insurance, up. Capital gains tax, up. Inheritance tax, up. Energy taxes, up. Business rates, up. First-time buyer stamp duty, up. Pensions tax, up. They have fiddled the figures. I don't like it, Mr. Speaker.
And Nigel Farage also has some interesting words too.
For me, the big one, of course, is the 1p a pint off draft beer, which I've worked out will save me over £1 a week, so I'm particularly thrilled with that. But economically, I sat listening to the numbers thinking this budget is illiterate. I don't know who's doing the sums, whether perhaps it's the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North, but the sums do not work. And the markets now agree with me, because just in the last couple of hours, we've seen a very substantial spike in gilt yields. We're not quite yet back to 2022 with that mini budget, but clearly people are saying this isn't going to work.
This isn't a budget for working people. It's a Trojan horse filled with hidden taxes and broken promises. Even the Office for Budget Responsibility, which usually keeps it dry, couldn't ignore the inflationary time bomb Reeves just set off. Spare a thought for small businesses, especially the small farms that Labour supposedly adores.
Inheritance tax hike on farmers, how's it going to impact you?
Well, it's terrible news, to be honest, because without sounding flippant, £1 million of farmland these days, it's 100 acres. You can't. People who have 100 acres have a full-time job. So anything over that, the add on 20%, and also we forget the capital gains tax as well on top of that, as well as high interest rates to borrow against that. It's unviable. It's not possible. I mean, I'm a seventh generation farmer on this farm I'm at. We've been here since 1703, and we hand it down. It's what we do. We're not sitting on this huge asset to be able to then sell it to live the life of Riley. We're doing this produce food that keeps you alive. I mean, I don't know how hard that is to understand for people in Westminster, but we're producing something that we don't have to be rely on from another country. We're doing it ourselves. I mean, we learned from the energy crisis, don't rely on other countries to supply necessities to keep us going. And this is food we're talking about.
Starmer loves to trot out his working-class hero routine, but this budget is a slaughterhouse for family farms and independent businesses. These aren't the mega corporations that can absorb a blow. They're small businesses struggling to keep the lights on. And now, thanks to Starmer and Reeves, they'll be hit with higher taxes, lower profits, and all for what? So Labour can claim they're fixing the NHS with a one-time cash dump. But not to worry, I'm sure Labour has a plan for all that farmland that's about to be sold off. Seems like all they have to do these days is call it grey belt land, and then they can build anything on it. Council housing, migrant accommodation, who knows? Let's face it, Reeves and Starmer don't have a clue about what it's like to run a small business anyway.
And I make the point that I've set up companies and run companies. Nobody on the front bench has ever worked in private business. Nobody on the front bench understands what genuine risk capital is. Our business secretary, from what I can make out, has never even had a job.
If they did, they wouldn't be hiking employer national insurance to a point where businesses are forced to cut wages or raise prices. This is a government with no skin in the game, happily piling on debt and taxes, while small businesses are forced to pick up the pieces. This so-called responsible budget is the very definition of irresponsible. By front-loading spending and borrowing like there's no tomorrow, Reeves has set us on a collision course with skyrocketing inflation. The OBR has already sounded the alarm. Labour's free-spending ways are going to push up prices, delay interest rate cuts, and leave everyone with less money in their pockets. So much for more pounds in your pocket. Reeves' grand vision for Britain is that you'll be paying more for your weekly shop, while your wages barely keep up with inflation. And here's the real insult. When Labour's tax hikes and spending spree inevitably come back to bite, who will foot the bill? We will. The very people who were promised a tax-free ride.
Make sure that the sums
I'm out of
always add
time.
up.
You're asking the public for 40 billion tax rises. Can you at least reassure people there are no more tax rises after this?
Well, I've committed to just have one budget a year. I'm not coming back to this in the
this
spring.
Parliament.
No, I'm not going to make commitments to never change taxes again. That would be irresponsible.
Reeves and Starmer might as well have waved around a giant IOU with Britain's future scrawled on it, because we'll be paying for this disastrous budget for years to come. Reeves and Starmer promised us the world. No tax hikes on working people, more money for the NHS, economic stability. Instead, they delivered a wrecking ball to the economy, and they're expecting us to pay for it. They hid behind the fine print, slipped us indirect taxes, and then had the gall to call it responsible leadership. If this is their idea of stability, I'd hate to see what chaos looks like. So next time Reeves and Starmer talk about protecting working people, remember this budget, a masterclass in political double-dealing that proves Labour's leaders can't be trusted as far as they can throw the red budget box. They tricked the nation, they've slapped us with the bill, and now we're all left to pick up the pieces of Labour's budget betrayal.